doing? So 2018's been kind of crazy. It's been a big, big year for me. So I left my old job, started my own company, and I got legal famous. So that's like Almost Famous, the movie, but instead of rock stars, it's all lawyers. So the way I got legal famous is by writing really long blog posts. And I mean like really long. I mean like 5,000 to 9,000 words long. So it feels really risky to ask anybody to read anything that long, especially when there are studies that say the average attention span is now only 8 seconds. 8 seconds, it's like shorter than a goldfish, right? So I have a few secret weapons in my toolbox, and I'm going to be talking about a couple of those today. And the session is called Visual Communications, right? So visuals. This is a cave painting that's been carbon dated 41,000 BC. Now, I think the oldest artifact of like writing is like 3,000 BC. So since the beginning of time, visuals have been part of the human experience, human behavior. So cave paintings tell us something about what we want. We want to express ourselves. We want to tell other people about what we see in the world around us. And the earliest attempts to do that have been through visuals, not language. So why are we so visually oriented? I think part of it is that we're physically wired that way. Half of our brain is involved in visual processing, and that means we are much more efficient and effective at processing visual information than we are at processing words. And that means we've designed the world around us to take advantage of our preference for visuals. So if you just pay attention, take a moment, look around in your day-to-day, you'll see that visuals are baked into modern life, especially where safety is concerned. The efficiency and effectiveness, how fast, how easily we process visual information makes it very, very powerful, right? So I don't know if you can read this, but it says, while you are traveling down this road, there is a chance that one or more rocks of a varying size may fall from the slopes on one or both sides of you. You should be aware of this before you travel this way so that you are cautious of this particular type of hazard. Now, in the time that it took me to read that, I could have been creamed by a rock, be dead. So I think the efficiency of visual communication is one reason, but I think there's another reason. I think visuals are powerful for another reason, and that has to do with feelings. There's a reason that so many sayings across so many cultures connect eyes with emotion. So Yeats, the poet, says love comes in through the eyes. We say that eyes are the windows to your soul. We say seeing is believing, right? Now, I know lawyers don't like to talk about feelings, but I talk about feelings a lot because I think they're important. And here's why I think that feelings are important. Now, John Cotter, who is a published author and expert on organizational change, says that we have a mental model for how we persuade others to change their behavior. And that mental model centers on education. It centers on information. It says that if we give people enough of the right information, they will change their thinking. And then by changing their thinking, you will change the way they act. That sounds reasonable to me. That's certainly how I think. I'm very information heavy, very information dense in my writing, and I do think it's important to educate people. But Cotter also tells us that this doesn't work. It doesn't work. So this is a classic example of information-based approach to persuasion, right? So this is accurate information. It's certainly relevant, and it ought to be persuasive. It ought to be persuasive, but we know it's not, right? We know it's not. Any smokers, ex-smokers in here? I used to smoke for a long time. And yeah, if you've been a smoker, you know. Yeah, you see the warning every time you buy a pack of cigarettes, right? Every time you take it out, gonna take one of the cigarettes out, you see the warning, and it does absolutely nothing. It does absolutely nothing. And why is that? because this is actually not how people make decisions at all, at all. So Cotter gives us a different mental model for how people decide to change, and that has 3 steps. It says people see something, they feel something, and then they decide to change. So let me give you an example of how to do this exact same persuasion in a different way. Yeah, our Canadian friends, they know how to do it. Yeah, they know how to do it. So this gives information, for sure, but it also creates an emotional response. Like, some of it is humor, right? Some of it is humor. Humor is very, very important. But this is a masterclass in visual storytelling for many, many reasons. So let's actually compare the two. This is very technical. This is precise language, and technical and precise are good. In law, a lot of communications are technical and precise, and they have to be. But it's also important to remember that technical can also be clinical, right? And clinical is not personal. So it's important to remember the technical depth of your audience and to speak to them in a way that they think and feel, right? So this is actually very personal. It's intentionally personal. It says you. This is directed at you. This creates a narrative in your head about what might happen to you. And that is the component of story that is so powerful, that immediate focus on the audience, the immediate focus on actions and events and feelings. So 20 years ago, marketers used to talk about look and feel. So that used to be about visual aesthetics. It was a nice to have for things to be visually pleasing, to be aesthetically pleasing. And now the thinking has changed, right? There's new theory in behavioral economics. There's new theory in organizational change. And we now know that the way things look are far more powerful, far more important. Why? Let me give you a fact. This is a number that shocked me. I actually had to Google it 2 or 3 times. 10,000. 10,000, that's a big number, right? 10,000. That's a number of brand messages that we see in one day. 10,000. So we are competing in an attention economy, and that competition is fierce, right? So how do we cut through the noise? How do we do that? Remember how I said the average attention span is 8 seconds? I didn't make that up either. I Googled it multiple times also. So it was a study from Microsoft, and there was a lot of discussion about it. And I think a lot of people interpret it to mean that we now have to communicate in 8-second chunks, right? They literally think it means that we are dumber than goldfish. Now, I don't think the same. I mean, obviously I don't, because otherwise, how would I write 9,000-word blog post, right? I think that it means something different. It doesn't mean that we no longer have the capacity to focus, the ability to focus. It means we no longer have to, because we have more options than ever. Here's another statistic. Consumers change screens 21 times in 1 hour. 1 hour, right? From your phone, to your computer, to your TV, to your tablet. So I think what it really means is that you have 8 seconds to get somebody's attention and convince them that you deserve to keep it, right? It's a much higher bar that we have to hit to get someone's attention and hold it. And as soon as we understand the burden, the responsibility of the communicator, then we have to think about, well, how do we do that? How do we do that? And it's not about the hot take, right? It's not about something bite-sized that can fit into someone's attention span. We have to think, how do we hit that higher bar? And I tend to think that we have to think about how to resonate, right? How to create an emotional response from our audience so that they want to stay with us for more than 8 seconds, so that they will stick with me through 5, 6, 9,000 words. So we then have to think about, what does it mean to resonate, right? What does it mean to create an emotional response? Resonate really means that we're not creating new emotion, right? We have to tap into emotions that already exist. That means we have to make an effort to understand our audience. We have to think more intentionally about how we communicate. We have to spend more time and energy crafting messages and communications that show that we understand our customer and our audience. So that takes empathy. Has anybody read stuff about empathy? There's a lot of content, a lot of talk around empathy now. Design thinking has taken off. I know my old boss, Josh Kubicki, was here at this conference, I think 2 years ago, talking about the client experience. And empathy is something we talked about a lot at our old firm. And it's really, really widely misunderstood because a lot of people confuse empathy with sympathy. Sympathy is about shared feelings. Sympathy is like my best friend is sad, that makes me sad. Sympathy is like my coworker is complaining because she's irritated. I commiserate. That's sympathy. Empathy is something totally different. Empathy is actually an intellectual exercise about feelings. So empathy is a set of tools, a set of processes, a set of mental processes that helps us put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. It's an intellectual exercise about seeing the world from somebody else's point of view so that we can better understand how they feel and why. And is that something that should matter to lawyers? Because I get mixed responses. What do you think? Do you think that's something that should matter to lawyers? Show of hands, just flash it. Yeah, that's great. It's a good crowd. I agree. I think that lawyers should think a lot about empathy, especially solo practitioners and small law firms. If you deal with individual clients, you absolutely have to have empathy. Because the way I look at it, when people need lawyers, they're usually going through a very stressful time in their lives, right? Maybe it's a death in the family. Maybe it's a dispute with a business partner. Maybe it's a divorce. But it is important to understand the state of mind of your client when they feel the need to find you, right? Before they even know who you are or have decided to engage you, understand where they're coming from in a structured way, right? Think about the context of their everyday lives, because this kind of exercise, I read a really good term for it in Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. He calls it commercial empathy. Commercial empathy. And I know that sounds kind of like commercial empathy, that sounds kind of predatory, but it's not at all. It's not at all. I think it is an intentional effort to understand when and why somebody needs your services, right? Because if you don't have that understanding, it's going to be hard for you to create value. And I think commercial empathy is the opposite of predatory. I think that it helps you give your clients a more emotionally positive experience, right? Because there's a lot of attempt to keep things professional. Like what I was saying about technical, clinical, impersonal. I think that professional doesn't have to mean that we forget we're people, right? It is a human-to-human interaction, and I think thinking about the emotional needs of your clients can help you design services that feel delightful. Delightful may be a different word than what I'm looking for, but when you're going through a tough time, right, you want your lawyer to give you reassurance. You want your lawyer to make sure that you're gonna be okay. And all of that can be very valuable to somebody who's going through a tough time. So today, this is the toolbox. These are some of the different types of visual communication that I'm going to be talking about. And I really do believe that these three things are the reason that so many people have been so kind to stay with me through 5, 6, 9,000 words. So sketches. How many of you have kids? Kids? Yeah, most of the room. So I don't have kids, so I just have myself to go on, and then now my friends have kids. And you guys all have some version of this in your kitchen, right? Most kids draw like 2, 3, 4. They go to preschool, kindergarten, they start to doodle. So I did that when I was a kid. I think, though, as we grow up, most of us stop. We stop doing this, right? We stop doodling, we stop drawing. And I think that's because as we get older, like, all of this becomes about, like, well, are you good or something? Like, is that something you're gonna do for a living? Like, are you good, artistic? I'm not. So the people who are familiar with my work, they're surprised to hear I can't draw at all. I can't. For like 20 years, I don't think I drew anything. Like, occasionally I would play Pictionary, but I was horrible. I was horrible at it. But like, when I was 30, I got a big promotion. That's the time when I went into a firm-wide role, reporting to the chairman. Prior to that, I'd been a really heavily operational role. I was embedded in like a high-end litigation practice. I was managing class actions, like sending like 100 emails a day to associates, income partners across the country. I was like managing billing and collections, so it was like nonstop. And then when I went into a firm-wide role, everything changed. So I had to really change the way that I communicated. And then, so my first big project in that role was partner education. I was supposed to design, create, drive the creation of a new partner education program around client service innovation and the client experience. So these are kind of like big, squishy, abstract concepts, right? And it was kind of a big deal for the firm. It was a big investment for the firm. Ultimately, every single partner went through like a whole day. It was a whole day event. And then if you think about it, that's a big investment because they're fee earners, and they're some of the highest rate fee earners in the firm, right? So it was a big deal, but just creating the content was a big challenge. And then my stakeholders were all different. Because I used to write, like very tactical, factual emails to senior associates, like, what's your status? Like, when are you gonna get this done? And now I had to like talk to firm leadership about these big like vision and like concepts. Where's the industry going? What's the future of the firm? Like, why are we doing all this, right? And I've always been a good writer. I wrote like really long memos. It was full of smart ideas. Like, I did a lot of research. Nobody read them. Like, nobody. I would send 5-6 page memos. Nobody read them. I did research. I used technical terms. Again, really smart things about brand architecture and adult learning theory. Nobody cared. Oh my God, I was so frustrated. I was super, super frustrated. And I was so sure that I wasn't going to be able to do it. Like, I wasn't going to be able to do this job. But I didn't give up. I just knew that what I was doing, like, wasn't working, right? So Nancy Duarte has a communications agency. She does consulting engagements for like big corporate communications, but she's also a speaker and writer. So she saved me. She really saved me. Like, I read 2 of her books at the time. One was called Slideology, and the other one was actually called Resonate. And then so I remember this quote. I was like, okay, I'm gonna draw. I'm gonna draw something, even though I'm terrible at it. And it totally worked. It totally worked. This is like, let's see, 4 or 5 years ago, 5 years ago. And now visual meetings are like all the rage, right? You should go check it out, like Google it, go on Amazon, there's really good books about it. When I started drawing and doodling in meetings, then the conversation changed, because when someone did read a memo, a lot of times the conversation was about, that's not the right word, right? It would be a semantics discussion about what I had gotten wrong, right? It felt like finished product that they had to correct and edit. But when I presented something like this, it's so obvious that it was in draft, right? It created white space, more air in the room for people to offer their perspectives. And this was important because some of the concepts that we were going to be talking about, like the future of the industry, how legal buy was changing, not everybody in firm leadership really thought exactly the same, right? So it was really important for me to tease out the differences, get them to talk about it in the room. And this happens a lot, right? It happens a lot in any endeavor where people are talking about knowledge work or ideas or the best way to move forward, right? If there are differing opinions The thing to do is have a structured, constructive conversation. And drawing, sketching can be a really powerful tool to help you do that. And it helped me with my job. It totally helped me with my job. I got what I needed, made the huge deck, created the curriculum, training went well. But I decided to actually extend that style into the actual training. So this is an adaptive version. I actually put this up on the screen in front of big law firm partners. And obviously this is like you should listen to your clients, you should talk less, you should listen more, right? Listening was a big part of the Seyfarth brand promise. So the voice of the client is, again, a technical, clinical term. It's an interview technique from Lean Six Sigma. So I knew that the partners have been told this before, that you have to hear the voice of the client, that you have to listen to your clients. So it's not about repeating that information, right? Because they had it. So I realized that there's there's an easier way to tell people difficult things they don't want to hear. Humor is important. Visuals are important. Sometimes they ease the way, right? They reduce the friction when you have to tell somebody something they don't want to hear or something they've heard a bazillion times before. This is another example. We did use this in partner education, and we did actually use it for, I think, external brand communications. So all the stuff on the left are all true things, right? These are true things that had been told to our partners, had been repeated market-wide. Some of the things are specific to the firm, but one of the things that I was told over and over and over again, like hundreds of times, is equity partners are really busy. And then, I felt the same. Like, I knew that. I used to work in a practice. I know lawyers are really, really busy, but then I had to really sit and eat my own dog food, right? I had to exercise commercial empathy for my audience. And I thought about, like, what does that really mean, right? What does that really mean they're really busy? And I realized the chairman and managing partner can get people into a room. He can say, come to this meeting. He can say, you guys are doing this training. He can get people into the room and to sit down, but he can't make them pay attention. He can't make them listen. He can't change their minds, right? That's the extent of authority. So I realized, okay, if I want them to pay attention, it has to look a certain way, right? It's my job to grab their attention and hold it. If I want them to really hear these messages instead of just sit there, then I have to deliver them in a way that feels fresh, even though they've heard it before, right? And many of these things, especially the pace of change is accelerating. Our world, the world that we live in, is more complex. The industry is more complex. Instead of telling them, I had to show them, right? Show them the complexity. And then so I think that these are all examples of how sketching does affect the way people perceive, receive, and process messages, right? And I think sketching is really important because it's a tool you can use right now. It's not about whether you're good at drawing. It's about how you're using it, right? It's about intention in your communication. And communication can go both ways. So think about how you can use this in your next meeting. Internal meeting, if you're doing planning for the next year, if you're doing planning for the next quarter. If you have a client where you're trying to get information from them and it's just not going well, think about how you can integrate doodling sketches into your meeting, right? When you're building a chronology of events, think too about how you can use things like Post-its, right? What's a visual representation of time? It's just a line, right? It's which things happened before and after other things. So I think that sketching can be a powerful tool. Now something a little bit more fun, emoji. Do you guys use emoji? Yeah? Oh, some shrugs, some yes. I love emoji. I use it all the time. I use it all the time in blog posts, use it on Twitter. So emoji comes from the Japanese words meaning picture, writing, and character. So they did originate in Japan on Japanese phones, and then they very quickly became popular, and then they went international. So just a couple of fun facts about emoji. Do you know that there's an international governing body? Like, they manage more than emoji. But there's like, I think 4-digit codes that make sure that things like language and currency symbols stay consistent across browsers or across operating systems. So it's a computing standard. In 2009, the first batch of emoji were integrated into the Unicode standard, and then the first batch was about 722 characters. Now, there's 2,800. So this has exploded, right? It's the growth of a new language. And this is how I like to think about emoji, and this is generally how I describe emoji, as the language of feelings, right? Because a lot of the core set, especially the faces and even things you can string together with other symbols, it's a shortcut for me. I do think of it as the language of emotion. And feelings are important, but they're messy, right? I've tried to write about feelings before, and they definitely add word count. And my blog posts are already too long. So this is an example of how I started experimenting with emoji. I think this is from like 2015. This is a great way to think about your client experience, right? Because they might give you like granular feedback about something that happened or how they thought about your performance. But really, at the end of the day, what does it really matter, right? If they're to the right, they're going to come back. If they're closer to the left, they're just not. And you see this system being integrated more and more into net promoter scores, into feedback systems. Anybody seen that like little kiosk thing at the airport with the 3 faces? My favorite thing about that, it has an angry face, like a neutral face, and a smiley face. My favorite thing, I think about it every time I see one. I saw a tweet that was a picture of that little machine, and the tweet said, "I just watched a 5-year-old boy press the angry face about 100 times." So I'll come back to that when we talk about data, because it is important to think about where data comes from. But yeah, I think of emoji as a shortcut to talk about something that many of us find it difficult to think and talk about. So to break up kind of all the long and dense posts that I write, sometimes I do something fun. Like this is an example of something fun I did. It was a deck I posted on SlideShare. And I tend to try to break up my posts with a lot of graphics. I make them in PowerPoint, by the way, but emoji are my secret weapon. That's kind of what makes it feel fun, But I think that, a lot of people like this, not because it was pretty or because it was funny or because it was fun. I think a lot of people liked it because it actually resonated, right, what it said. And then, so getting back to how to resonate, I think people liked it because it got to how it tapped into how a lot of people were actually feeling about the state of the industry. Like I talked about stuff that people were already feeling. And this is another example of how I did that. So this is about big law, but I think it's true across the legal industry, right? There's a lot of talk about disruption. Like there's a lot of talk about disruption everywhere. So, oh my God, everything's changing. Like we have to do something right now. We have to wake up every day and innovate something right now, like before lunch. But we're talking about an industry of lawyers, so of course there's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of cynicism, like there's a lot of doubt. And then when people talk about innovative things or new ideas, there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of criticism. And then what I don't like about that is that it's a vicious circle. And that, like, what keeps growing is this dogpiling on lawyers. Like, oh my God, lawyers are like this. Lawyers won't do it. Lawyers are not going to try that. Lawyers hate technology. Lawyers hate change. And I don't like that. That's not helpful, is it? Like, how does that help? And I don't think it's true either, right? I don't think that we have given lawyers a fair shake because, like I keep saying, it's not that we give people information and then they change their thinking and they change their behavior, right? I don't think the legal industry has really had its fair shake of seeing something that makes you feel something that makes you want to change. So I think that deck was successful. You know what, I'll tweet that out. Please check it out, it's super fun. But I want to show you a different example. This is a more practical application of now empathy. How thinking about feelings and emotions can be practically applied to the way that you think about your services. So this is called the value proposition canvas. It's a structured visual tool in business model design that helps you come up with new services or to clarify your thinking about how you talk about your offerings, right? And then so on the slide, I say start on the right. Start with the customer persona. Start with deep thinking about what it is your customer is trying to get done, what are the pains they're feeling now, and what are the gains that they want, right? Because you have to fit what you do within the context of their lives, right? They are the star of the story. Because this is why most legal marketing is ineffective. It's not because it's not provocative, it's not because, it's not pretty. It's not effective because the lawyer is the star of the story. It's a long list of clinical facts about where the lawyer went to school. Here are all the cases the lawyer's ever worked on. Here are all the cases the lawyers won. And then from the lawyer's perspective, it seems like that's the way to do it, right? That's what a lot of the bios do. And it's important to give those facts. It's important to give information. But I think the most effective, intentional way to communicate to your clients and prospects is actually to tell a story, right? Think about a story where your customer, where your client is the star. Like, what are they trying to do? What pain are they trying to relieve? Like, how do you fit into that story? Because if you don't have that story, you're not going to resonate in a world where people switch screens 21 times in an hour, where people are looking at 10,000 brand messages a day. So you really need to think in a focused, deep, engaged way about who it is you're talking to, what they're trying to do, and how you can help, right? That's a really good communications check on like your business model. If you don't have clear, crisp answers to those questions, then I guarantee you that your marketing is not as effective as it could be. So this is actually a different application of emoji, right? Emoji also helps us think about attitudes. This probably is helpful to smalls and solos trying to think about, well, where are we going to specialize? What is our market? Who should our clients be? Where should we focus in our marketing efforts? So this is adapted from Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. This is, he's a Silicon Valley marketer and a very influential author. So this is called the technology adoption lifecycle. It's based on some older theory about how innovations tend to spread. That work was done by Everett Rogers. But I think that Moore's work here is really helpful to think about because he actually describes in great depth how these 5 different types respond to new things. And it's not about demographics. Demographics tend to be plastic. Demographics are about where do they live, how old are they, their gender. But I don't know, women 25 to 35 living in a big city, how much do those women really have in common? That's a big group, right? Resonating with a specific customer segment requires a deeper understanding of what they value. So that's called psychographics, not demographics. And then so I like this model. It's not immediately relevant to every single situation, but I think it's important to try to segment your customers by what they value and their buying and consumption preferences, right? How do they want to find you? How do they want to interact with you? I think it's important to segment your clientele. Are there clients that prefer to email. They prefer digital channels. They prefer convenience, because that's one psychographic profile, right? And then there are clients who really need the face-to-face touch. Like, they really want to see you. They want to make sure they see your face. They're sitting in your office. They want to make sure that they're getting that person-to-person, face-to-face attention. So I think it's a helpful way to think about, like, well, what makes people happy? Like, you have to pay attention to how they're feeling. That's the only way that you're going to deliver experiences that feel valuable to the customer. So, third tool, data. Well, we talked about feelings. Lawyers don't like feelings. How do lawyers feel about numbers? Lawyers really don't like numbers. Yeah, in my experience with lawyers, some of them have what I can only describe as a spectacular aversion to numbers. I've had lawyers tell me that quote, like, well, I was promised no math. Like, I don't want to do this. But it's everywhere. Data's everywhere, so we have to talk about it. There are 2.5 quintillion bytes of data created every day. Like, quintillion, what kind of number is that anyway, right? Like, I had to make sure that I knew exactly what that number was. So it's million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, and then quintillion. So 2.5 quintillion is 2, 5 followed by 14 zeros. So that's a lot. It's a lot of data because, I don't know, like this presentation has 25 megabytes. The data explosion has to do with some of the same trends that I mentioned before, right? We have a lot more devices. Like, we have a lot more devices, Internet of Things, we have a lot more devices that generate data, that collect data, right? So that pace is only going to explode further because we're going to have more devices, not less. But none of that is why you should really care. You should care because data can be powerful and useful. Like, it really can. If you're in a business where you have to convince people of anything, you should definitely pay attention to what can be done with data now, especially data visualization. I like to think of data as a storytelling tool. So, has everybody heard of Tableau? Tableau is like famous software. I think they're the market leader, although Microsoft is investing in Power BI. I like both, but I've been to a couple of Tableau conferences, and I really like their corporate mission. It's only 7 words. I think they say, I wrote it down here, I want to get it right. Man, I thought I wrote it down. The corporate mission is something like, we help people understand and interpret data. Tableau's corporate mission is we help people interpret, see and understand data. There you go. Thank you so much. I really like that mission. I think that a lot of people have some phobia, some aversion of math. I think it's because of the way we teach math in school, frankly, but I think helping people see and understand data is a really good mission, and I think that lawyers are going to have more opportunity to integrate data-oriented decision-making. I think it's important for you to pay attention. But why do I know that data can help tell stories? I think it's important to think about how to make pictures out of data, right? That's literally what it means to visualize data visualization. So this is an example. It's from the Altman-Weil survey of law firm leaders and chief legal officers. So I don't know if you can read this, but I will read it to you. The question is, how serious are law firms about changing their service delivery model to provide greater value as opposed to simply cutting costs? So this is a question that they've asked to both client and firm for years now. I think the comparison is really instructive, but they report the average every year, and then they give you a table. I actually put it into an area chart, so I know the numbers are small, so I will also read you the numbers. The firm leaders, the average response was somewhere between 5.2 and 5.6 every year from 2012 to 2017. Now, clients responded differently. The average is between 3.2 and 3.8. every year. So if you just look at the numbers, the average, and then like the table, I think the natural conclusions are two things. Firms grade themselves more generously than clients do, and then none of this has changed much since 2012. But if you look at the picture, if you plot every data point, right, and you make a picture out of it, you see that only one of those things is true. Yeah, firms still grade themselves more generously than clients, but actually there is change. There is meaningful change happening in the marketplace, right? So the proportion of clients who think law firms are not serious at all has gone from 9% to 17% in 6 years. That's almost double. 1 in 6 corporate clients don't think law firms are serious at all. I think that's bad, right? I don't really like this question, frankly, but it does say something meaningful, right? Because it's asking people to speculate about law firms' intentions. It gets at how many clients really trust firms to invest in change. And it tells us that 1 in 6 clients think law firms are BS, basically. So I think that is important for several reasons, right? It helps explain some of the dialogue in that segment of the industry, which I think is getting more adversarial, because influencers tend to be very opinionated, they tend to be vocal, but they tend to emerge from the edges, right? Because really opinionated people are going to be at the edges of this graph. There we go. I think I'm just going to hold this for the rest of the time. But I think this is a different question from the same survey that they keep asking both sides. I think this actually is a better picture. This question asks, how much pressure are corporations really putting on law firms to change the value proposition in legal service delivery? So to me, this is a really good kind of other side of the coin. The last question was asking respondents to speculate about what firms were thinking. Now, this is asking respondents, like, well, what do you observe about what clients are doing? Because it's really easy to assume from this slide that, oh, firms just aren't listening. Firms just can't hear what clients are saying. Firms just don't understand what clients are telling them. But I don't think that's true, because this actually tells you firms and clients think pretty similarly about what clients are saying, right? This tells us that lots of clients are unhappy, but they're not really asking. And I bring this up for a reason. If you don't ask aggressively, if you don't ask persistently, if you don't ask your clients how they feel about you, a lot of them, they're not going to tell you. They're just not going to come back, right? So you really have to ask for feedback. Like, you have to do it persistently, you have to do it regularly, and you have to think about, like, how do we bake this into the client experience, that we collect information? Because even in corporations, even in large law firms that have big staff, right? They have large teams. They have budgets for feedback collection. They have budgets for client listening programs. Even in that segment of the market, there's a disconnect between what clients really feel and what they're willing to tell you. So the language of numbers, whether or not we're talking about data viz or not, I think it's really important that lawyers really understand what can be done, what opportunities there are when they get more familiar and comfortable with numbers, right? In the corporate segment, inside counsel are feeling more pressure than ever to kind of speak the language of numbers. Financial literacy is now kind of table stakes if you want to work at a big corporation as inside counsel. But I think for small law firms and solos, the imperative is even greater, right? It's even greater. Understanding market trends can help you see new opportunity in the marketplace. It's really important to understand client matter profitability if you want to stay in business, right? And I'm telling you that there are more and more tools to help you do that, right? Tools like Clio, tech tools that'll help you better understand data, see and understand data. And I think, the democratization of data and insights, that's important. It's important and I love it. But I also want to tell you that it's not magic, right? If you want to work with data, if you want to better understand like finances, it does take time and work. And I want to make sure that you understand what it takes, right? Like it takes time, it takes effort, it takes talent, like some talent. So I think that for small law firms and solo practitioners, it's really important to make good decisions about how you're going to spend time and effort. Like, do you want to institute some of these tools into your practice? And you then have to think about, well, what's the best way to do that, right? Like, there are freelancers who can help. There's other people who do this for a living who can help. There are technology tools that can help. There are training like materials that can help. So it's important to think about your goals and how you can best achieve them. This is another example of kind of data storytelling that's less about pictures. But it does tell us something about the marketplace, so I wanna talk you through this. So this is the average revenue per lawyer of the AmLaw 100. So these are the biggest firms in America, right? So this is the prevailing narrative, that they had like such a good run from 1986 to the recession, just that line screaming upward, right? And then the subprime crisis happened and the bottom just fell out for all of them. That's the prevailing narrative. I actually think this tells a more nuanced story. This is now the same numbers, the same data set, but it is now adjusted for inflation. And then some of the red lines and the text, these are the previous economic downturns. And you can see, once you adjust the numbers for inflation, there's little peaks and valleys, right? So big law has been through this before. They've suffered with the economy, and then they've always recovered before. But actually, I think the Great Recession, the pattern is a little different, right? The flattening is longer, the valley is much longer, although shallower, and they really haven't actually recovered. 10 years later, they haven't really recovered to the pre-recession level. And I think there are reasons for this, but the length of the Great Recession was much longer than the previous two downturns. What this means is that it gave market participants more time to respond. And this is how corporate counsel have responded. I think that it points to structural changes in the marketplace. So this graph shows the rate of change in number of employed lawyers by practice setting from 1997 to 2007. So this really captures the insourcing trend. And you can see that probably because of the length of the Great Recession and because of the great pressure to institute cost containment, corporate counsel changed the market structurally. They changed the market structurally. Part of this, I think, points to new opportunity in the marketplace. Like, I think corporate counsel are thinking in, new and creative ways about their legal supply chain. They're more open to alternative legal service providers. Lots of corporations are kind of thinking about, well, we tried convergence, we tried going to like 12 platform firms, right? Maybe it's time to try our regional firms again. Maybe it's time to experiment with different sizes of firms. And then so I think it creates more opportunity. Anytime there's a structural change in the marketplace, there are threats to the current leaders, and then there are new opportunities for different players. So this, I actually wanted to show you this video, but I couldn't figure out how to embed it. I will tweet out this link. It's an amazing example of visual storytelling that really uses numbers to educate about a topic, and it's like super emotionally resonant. So I will tweet this out. But in closing, I just want to remind you, the value of intentional communication is not actually in any of these tools or techniques. It's not really about how you do it. It's more about your thinking, your deep, intentional thinking about what your customers and clients want. I think that habit of empathy is what helps you communicate more effectively, not just in whatever marketing initiative or marketing campaign. Oh my God. I'm just gonna hold it for the rest of the time. It's not about like how good each piece of marketing collateral is or marketing campaign. It's really the empathy that permeates your thinking in the entire customer relationship, right? How you think about attracting new clients and keeping the ones you have. So there is really no more B2B or B2C. It's H2H, human to human. So in closing, I would remind you to remember that thank you. Hi. Okay, I'm just gonna let this hang like an accessory. So in closing, I would just remind you, remember that you're a person, your client's a person, whether or not they work for a business or they're, an individual, just remember it's a human to human interaction. So thank you, you guys have been great. I think we have time for a few questions. So any questions? No? No questions?
I'm curious if you've, thank you. I'm curious if you have looked at using these kinds of visual storytelling techniques to talk to clients.
You mean like in legal practice? Yeah, a lot of clients are actually interested in that, but some of the limitations come from like the availability of data, what questions they're trying to answer. Because when it comes to data analytics, the methods are there, the tools have gotten a lot better, but something that's a big limitation in legal is the availability of reliable, structured data sets. But yeah, the clients definitely have more interest, and I think a lot of firms of all sizes are experimenting. So yes.